They didn't even bother turning their heads when his aircraft rolled out. It was just another gray morning over the South China Sea, but the NATO air drill was buzzing with high-profile attention. Countries brought their best: Raptors, Typhoons, Strike Eagles, all shimmering under hangar lights and posing like royalty for satellite press. American pilots stood near their fifth-generation fighters, helmets under arms, confident grins in place. Brits joked with the Aussies. A Japanese crew ran precision checks on their stealth interceptor. Then came the old frame. A small Indonesian fighter was being towed onto the tarmac, its paint sun-faded, its airframe a patchwork of panel replacements and heat scarring. Compared to the modern hardware parked around it, the jet looked like a leftover from a decade-old conflict. Laughter flickered across the lineup. "That thing's still flying?" an American lieutenant muttered, sipping his energy drink. "Hope he brought a GPS at least." "Maybe a flare gun for backup," someone else joked. The snickers were casual but sharp, the kind that only come when superiority is assumed. From the operations tower, analysts reviewed flight rosters. On the screen, one line of data stood out awkwardly among the digital-rich assets. Call sign: Elang 07. Pilot: Captain Adit Santoso. Airframe: custom-modified air superiority platform, older gen. Electronics package: limited ECM. No stealth coding. No AESA radar. A NATO planner winced. We're really letting this thing participate? Across the flight line, Captain Adit Elang Santoso adjusted the cuffs of his flight gloves in silence. Late 30s, short-cropped black hair, weathered features. He wore his flight suit like armor, not pressed, not perfect, but lived in. He moved without wasted motion, eyes calm behind a tinted visor. The patch on his shoulder read simply, "Garuda Wing 3, a junior American pill." Ad approached, trying to be friendly but missing the tone. "Heard your radar's older than mine. Gonna eyeball the F-22 up there?" Elang didn't answer, just gave a polite nod and stepped into his aircraft. His crew said nothing either, just ran their final checks with swift, unceremonious gestures. They didn't wear matching jackets or fancy headsets. One technician tapped the tail fin twice, quietly. Not superstition. A signal. In the NATO mission briefing room, instructors began outlining the training exercise, a complex multi-nation aerial maneuver simulation with rules designed around visual engagement, radar tracking, and evasive coordination. The F-22, representing a red team stealth aggressor, was expected to dominate quickly. An American colonel smiled. "Let's not waste time. Some of these jets won't even get a radar ping before they're dusted." He didn't have to name names. Everyone knew which aircraft he meant. Indonesia's inclusion had been approved at the last minute. A diplomatic nod, not a tactical threat. On paper, they were flying a jet that should have been phased out years ago. But Adit hadn't come for show. He'd come because for years, his skies hadn't offered parades. Only silence. Only tension. And training was something you did in wind and sweat, not on briefing slides. One senior NATO controller leaned over to another and whispered, "Why'd they even send him?" Obligation? Politics. Maybe just to fill the sheet. Back on the tarmac, Elang's jet powered up. There was no fanfare, no flashy takeoff. It lifted gently from the runway like a hawk stretching its wings in the fog, unnoticed by the other birds, yet moving with quiet purpose. Inside the cockpit, the screen flickered softly. Instruments were clean, minimalist, analog-heavy. No synthetic voiceovers, no artificial battlefield overlays. Just a man, the machine, and the sky. He tuned the frequency to match range control, acknowledged the go order in a crisp baritone, and then shut the comms again. No chatter, just climb. In the ops room, someone marked Elang 07 as airborne. A NATO specialist glanced at the screen and sighed. This one's not lasting long. High above the sea, the F-22 already prowled, cloaked in stealth, waiting to pounce. And no one, absolutely no one, expected what was coming next. But what no one saw was what this pilot had trained for in silence. The skies above the South China Sea were calm, but the radar rooms were not. The F-22 had already taken position, circling at altitude like a shadow. Its pilot, Captain Trent Vandal Holbrook, was one of the most decorated aggressor pilots in the Pacific Command, known for his speed, unpredictability, and confidence. He flew with swagger, not arrogance, but close. Elang's Indonesian jet had only just entered the simulation zone. Observers had eyes everywhere: infrared sensors, AWACS feeds, radar grids stacked across multiple nations. The assumption was clear. Within moments, the Raptor would acquire the older jet and finish the simulated kill. Fast, clinical, and inevitable. "Raptor 1, proceed with intercept," came the radio command. "Copy," Holbrook replied, grinning in his oxygen mask. "Let's go fishing." But there was no bite. The radar showed nothing, not even a flicker. Holbrook frowned, scanned left, then right. Still nothing. He checked the screen again. His opponent was supposed to be moving north-northeast at low altitude. A blip, maybe. A trail. But the screen stayed blank. He adjusted elevation. Nothing. In the NATO control room, one of the mission supervisors tapped his headset. Elang 07 should be within scan range now. The French radar officer shook his head. Negative. He's either cold or buried. Buried? Flying so low he's using the sea's radar shadow to hide. That's suicidal in open air. Unless he's trained for it. Meanwhile, Elang moved like a whisper beneath the radar shelf, skimming barely above wave height, throttle modulated by fingertip pressure. He wasn't flying fast. He was flying exact. Every movement smooth. Every second calculated to the centimeter. Inside the cockpit, the altimeter bobbed between 90 and 120 feet. The radar remained off. His hands hovered over manual countermeasure toggles, but he hadn't touched them. He didn't need to yet. The real power wasn't in deception. It was in timing, and the sky was his clock. Above him, the F-22 circled higher, now visibly agitated. Holbrook broke formation, dove slightly, banked to scan the sea surface. Then it happened. A lock tone. Short, sudden. Blazing green on the Raptor's warning system. "What the?" Holbrook snapped. He rolled hard left, dove, deployed flares out of reflex. But nothing followed. No missile trail. Just silence. He yanked into a vertical climb to escape, but his sensors were blind. Elang had already peeled away, disappearing back into the cloud line like a predator who'd already won but refused to gloat. NATO analysts scrambled through feed logs. The AWACS operator called out, "Replay Elang 07 track now!" The footage was hard to interpret at first. Then they saw it. Elang had hugged a reef shelf at the precise moment the F-22 began its scan. He used the natural topography of the ocean, combined with the cloud's shadow patterns, to remain invisible. Then, in a 9.5-second window, he popped above the radar arc, matched the F-22's blind angle, and locked from 3 o'clock low, all manually. No stealth coding, no advanced radar jamming, just pure spatial prediction. In the control room, a British commander stood slowly. Did he just single-cycle a 5th-gen platform with a Gen 3? The Australian rep muttered, "This can't be real." But it was. The drill wasn't over yet. Holbrook tried again, dropping into terrain-following mode to get below the clouds. Raptor 1 attempting re-engage. He had no idea that Elang had already looped behind him again. this time using the F-22's own vapor trail as visual cover. The Indonesian jet rode that tunnel like a surfboard, sliding directly beneath the blind cone. Second lock tone. "He's behind me again!" Holbrook shouted. "Abort! Disengage! Sim kill confirmed!" The F-22 pulled away, but it was too late. Everyone had seen it. For a few breathless seconds, NATO's ops room remained frozen. Not a word, not a cough. Just Elang's flight data scrolling across the screen, line after line of analog stats, all perfectly clean. No errors, no cheats, no tech edge, just intuition. "Sir," the radar officer finally asked, "what kind of training is that?" The room stayed quiet. Then came the third act. Elang, instead of retreating, re-entered the battle zone after sim confirmation. Not for another attack, but to finish his maneuver. He executed a 270-degree barrel dive, followed by a side slip so tight that ground radar lost him completely for 3 seconds. "He disappeared," someone whispered. "Off all channels." Seconds later, his signal reappeared, parked at high altitude, his engines at idle, his jet hovering like a ghost. The message was clear. I was never chasing. I was waiting. Back on the deck, a South Korean commander leaned forward slowly. "That wasn't luck." "No," the British officer replied. "That was, something we weren't trained to detect." Was this luck or something they weren't trained to detect? No one wanted to be the first to speak. The debriefing room, usually filled with post-flight banter and coffee-fueled bragging, felt like a courtroom. Monitors lined the walls, frozen on frames showing a grainy Indonesian jet locking the world's most advanced fighter, twice. At the center of the room, Captain Adit Elang Santoso sat upright, arms folded, eyes scanning no one in particular. His flight suit was still zipped, his gloves folded neatly on the table before him. Across from him sat Captain Trent Holbrook, the F-22 pilot. Gone was the confident smirk. In its place, clenched jaw, shoulders set tight. His helmet sat untouched beside him, like a prop he no longer felt worthy of. A NATO moderator cleared his throat. "Let's begin with the data." A technician hit play. The screens lit up. Radar logs, telemetry overlays, cockpit footage. The moment of the first lock, then the second, and finally, the disappearing act. A French officer leaned forward, brow furrowed. "You flew manual radar." "Manual?" Elang gave a slow nod. "Yes." "And no AWACS support?" "Negative." "Then how did you—" Elang's voice cut through gently yet firmly. "I was never chasing the jet. I was chasing its rhythm." The room quieted again. An American general stood, remote in hand. He rewound to the second engagement, pausing as the Indonesian jet aligned perfectly behind the F-22's blind arc. "That approach path, you used the vapor trail as cover?" Elang nodded again. "That wasn't in any textbook." "No," Elang replied. "It came from flying near volcanoes." Heads turned. He continued. "Ash clouds, thermal lift, low visibility, no satellite support. If you don't understand the wind there, you crash or vanish." A British commander shook his head in disbelief. "And you trained for that? In combat conditions?" Elang didn't answer, but the silence said enough. A Russian observer, Lee, and back, arms crossed. "So, you won on terrain?" Elang's eyes locked with his. "I didn't win." A pause. "He flew expecting I'd play the same game. I didn't." Holbrook, to his credit, finally spoke. "That second lock, you were under me the whole time?" Elang nodded. "I matched your wake pattern. You dropped speed to bait. I didn't take it. I waited until your inertia locked you into a climb path. Then I rose. Holbrook exhaled sharply and looked away. The NATO moderator tried to recenter the room. The concern now is repeatability. Was this a one-off? Or are there others flying like this? An Indonesian Air Force colonel slid a thin binder onto the table. Inside, hand-sketched diagrams, annotated maneuvers, raw wind vector calculations over Southeast Asian terrain. "We don't train in flight hours," he said calmly. "We train in minutes survived." There were no smiles, only recalibrated respect. Another screen showed drone footage of Elang practicing similar paths over rice paddies and coastlines back home, hiding not from radars, but from real missiles during border patrols where failure didn't mean a debrief, but death. The American general finally leaned forward. "Why didn't you say anything before?" Elang gave a small smile. "Because no one was listening." The moderator sat down slowly. "You know, you just rewrote a chapter of our doctrine today." Elang rose from his seat, folding his gloves. "No, I just reminded it where it started." He walked to the door, paused, then turned once more. His voice was soft. "You asked how, but maybe it's time to ask why." And then he left. The room remained silent. No one laughed anymore. No one commented on old jets or analog systems. Every pilot there knew some things can't be upgraded into an aircraft. They have to be carved into the person flying it. They wanted answers, but did they ask the right question? The hangar smelled like jet fuel and rain-damp concrete. Most of the foreign aircraft had already been wheeled back into their bays, spotless and gleaming under the floodlights. Crews buzzed around them, performing routine checks, logging data, resetting for the next simulation. But at the far end of the hangar, where the noise thinned and the air felt heavier, stood the Indonesian jet. Its paint was faded. Its frame was pitted. Its presence unmissable now. Captain Elang stood quietly beside it, helmet cradled in one hand. He wasn't speaking, just watching, as if waiting for the sky to tell him something only he could hear. A voice broke the stillness behind him. "Sir?" He turned slowly. A young NATO cadet approached, maybe 22, his training helmet under his arm, uniform crisp, but his face betraying something raw, not awe, not confusion. "Reverence. I just wanted to ask." The cadet hesitated, then continued. "Was it real? You really locked the Raptor? Twice?" Elang gave a faint smile, more memory than ego. "Yes." The cadet looked down, gripping his helmet tighter. "And the vanish? I saw the radar feed. You were gone, like, completely." Elang nodded once. That part was easy. The cadet blinked. "Easy?" Elang walked slowly over to the nose of his aircraft and placed one gloved hand on the metal. "The hard part isn't disappearing." He turned back to face the cadet. "The hard part is knowing when to reappear." The cadet exhaled. That answer would stay with him. Elang reached into his flight bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper, creased, stained at the corners, edges softened from years of unfolding and refolding. He handed it over. "What is this?" the cadet asked. "My first flight path into contested airspace. Before we had tracking systems, before I had backup." The cadet opened it. It wasn't a chart. It was a map, hand-drawn, oval, laid with wind vectors, cloud densities, terrain ridges. Every note handwritten in Bahasa. At the center, one phrase was circled twice. "Trust the air, not the screen." The cadet looked up. "Why give this to me?" Elang stared into the hangar, his voice quiet. "Because one day you'll fly a jet newer than thought, faster than doctrine, and someone will still try to find you the old way." He turned fully now, face lit by the soft yellow lights above. And on that day, don't make them ask how you did it. Make them ask why they never learned to. The cadet stood taller, nodded, and clutched the map like it was sacred. Behind them, a maintenance crew worked silently on the Indonesian jet, wiping it down slowly, carefully. Not because it needed to fly again tonight, but because now it meant something. Elang turned to leave, pausing at the edge of the hangar. Rain had started again, soft, rhythmic. He looked back once. The cadet stood still beside the old fighter, eyes on the hand-drawn map, the storm reflected in the polished helmet he held. No applause, no awards, just silence. The kind only respect knows how to hold. They came expecting a checkbox. Instead, they witnessed a doctrine-breaking lesson. If you believe legacy isn't built in applause, but in silence and sacrifice, drop A in the comments and subscribe to AS Stories, where real warriors don't wait for permission to be legends,